We've all come across that beautiful fabric before, either online or in store, and you just pick it up and it just makes you gasp. Like, it's so beautiful. But then it takes you like a nanosecond later to either touch it or look further, your brain to register what the fabric is, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, what a nightmare fabric. I could never sew with that. But what if you could? Coming up in this video, I have my top 4 tips to help you step out of the safety zone and really start sewing any difficult fabric. We want those glorious fabrics that just make you smile. Welcome back, my sewing friends. It is delightful to see you here. All your smiling faces there. Welcome. If you are brand new here, my name is Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we talk everything garment sewing because we want you to sew those amazing garments that you really, really love. And if you've been around here for a while, you will know that I often talk about quilting cotton being the like level 0. It's the middle ground, the like flatline, baseline starting point to sew anything. And those other fabrics, right, the other nice ones, they just kind of intimidate you, right? Aren't you just a little bit scared to sew something really fancy? And we'll talk about what that means in a minute, but I don't want to let those fabrics bully you into submission anymore. We want to learn how to sew them. So I have my best 4 tips. These tips are pretty generalized. Obviously, every fabric has its own little particulars and specialties and all of that. But these are 4 tips that can broadly help you sew anything. So you can just really start feeling more confident in picking up any fabric that is difficult. So what makes a fabric a nightmare fabric, a difficult fabric? It's basically that it moves around a lot when we're sewing it or cutting it, or, you know, it's generally that it moves, it's thick, it's bulky, it's thin. And the key is that we want to stabilize it in some way. That is what we're doing across all of these areas, is stabilizing it in some way. But first, what might a nightmare fabric include? It could include stretchy fabric and anything that the edges curl and roll over under. Or of course, if those raw edges just fray even by looking at them. Could be something soft and sheer. Even more of a nightmare if it is super sheer. Something soft and slinky like rayon, satin. It's just going to cause you nightmares. Extra nightmare if it is sheer and slinky, soft, slippery. And don't even get me started on velvet or corduroy or stretch velvet when they're combined. Maybe it's just super thick and bulky, or even super duper thick and bulky like a big thick wool. In any case, you know what makes a difficult fabric because you look at it and think, yuck, yuck. Okay, so how do we stabilize these? As I said, everyone has specifics, but in general, my biggest secret weapon is spray starch. Yes, old-fashioned spray starch that you might have heard in stories of grandma starching a collar or something way back in some day. You can get an aerosol version, a wet spray version, and both are fantastic. So how it works is the starch stiffens and stabilizes the fabric when it is dry and ironed. So you spray it on and it works really good for raw edges and things like this. So you spray it on and then you press it and iron it so it dries and heats, and it kind of turns a bit crispy, but it means it stops the fabric from stretching, curling, slipping, whatever it is, and you can sew it with that structure inbuilt, and you just pop it in the wash and it's all gone. This really is like a miracle. It is so cheap, but so effective. It's really good for stretchy fabrics, for curling edges of the stretchy fabrics, for slippery, slinky fabrics where it just slips and moves all the time. It's really good for that. It's not going to be of any use for thick and bulky fabric, but generally all the other things, it is like miracle for. You can also get like whole baths that you can dip in whole lengths of fabric if you want to go that far. So I usually find this in the laundry aisle supermarket. It is a little bit harder to find because it is quite old-fashioned. No one uses it. So it's a starch, an ironing aid might be called, but have a look for it. It should be in your ironing section of somewhere. You might have to search for it a little bit, but it is absolutely worth it to have in your like sewing kit as a little helper rescue item. I know you're not going to like this one, but to handle difficult fabrics, one of the easiest ways is to hand baste. So what this is using a hand sewing needle and really roughly, gently just sewing in place the item that you want to sew or around the edge before you sew it and stay stitching it by hand. It works because when we do it by hand, we have more control over easing in fabric and it not slipping or stretching, and we can put that thread in really gently and nicely in its spot so it stays there, and then we can sew over the top. And I mean, it's basically already half sewn, so it can't move if it's already half sewn, right? So it's really good for anything you want to temporarily sew in place. For example, the zipper, hand-basted zipper in place, or even the hem in place, or even seams. You can hand-baste the seam first and then sew it. You can even use it as a stay stitch around the whole edges of fabric to stabilize it and then sew it together. So good for anything to temporarily put in place and or slippery fabric, knit fabric, anything where it sort of moves, and thick fabrics as well, right? Because it stops anything from moving whilst you're sewing it under the machine. Because often the problem is the top layer will move in separately from the bottom layer of fabric in a seam, and that's where we cause trouble. So you want to hand baste this in place. Just a nice little running stitch is all you have to do by hand, and it's half sewn, so it can't move if it's already half sewn, right? And if you didn't know, you want some beeswax for your hand sewing kit, just regular plain beeswax. You run it through the thread and it stops it from sort of like knotting and nesting up and getting like knots when you sew it. A hot tip within the tips, extra for you, is beeswax. So a lesser known way to handle difficult fabrics is to stabilize it using interfacing, which you know about, or like a tearaway tissue paper. So hear me out. So the one you know about, interfacing. That is why we use it on facings and necklines and all these kinds of areas that we want more stability. We already use it for. But you could use it for areas like just on the fabric around the zip, or maybe the whole piece. If you're making a really tight bodice, like almost corset style, you want to like interface the entire fabric panels, right? So that all of the fabric is actually stabilized. And so if you don't want to have interfacing there all the time, what you can use is a tearaway like tissue paper. Yes, the tissue paper that is on all those patterns that you cut out and all the leftover tissue stuff. This is excellent for this job. So all you do is you cut strips of the tissue paper and then you sandwich your fabric in between it, and then you just sew like normal. The tissue paper will tear away after you're done, and or it will dissolve and wash away in the first wash if anything is left in the stitch lines. Quite amazing, right? So the tissue paper offers stability like we were just talking about with your fabric under here, your presser foot on top. This is nice and soft and stable, and so it doesn't push or pull that fabric as the foot goes under it, keeping it stable. And it's good to do even top and bottom, but you might just need the top. See how you go, but it's something to experiment with. Again, really good for sheer fabrics when they're really super fine and light, and sheers for slippery and like fabric that just puckers, or even velvets and knits when it moves, anything that's moving under the foot there. Not as good for bulky fabrics, but it can be useful. So, of course, don't throw away all those little tissue paper scraps now. You have a use for them. And for difficult fabrics, you would like a walking foot. So I am sure that you've heard of a walking foot before and always wondering, like, what is it? Do I need it? What a walking foot does. Yes, it's a big, very big contraption. So it's meant to help not that pushing and pulling of the fabric that we just talked about when your foot usually goes through and it pushes that top layer, causes lots of problems, right? The fabric moves. So this helps stabilize it as you sew. So if you look really closely here, as it moves, it's got this top layer of feet, right? That moves up and down. And so basically what it does is as your fabric feeds through, so let's say this is fabric, and we have the teeth underneath the machine, right? And so those teeth, the feed dogs, they move up and down, right? And that's actually what moves the fabric through the machine. They come up and down. So what happens is when they come up, great, there's pressure from your foot and pressure from here and it moves. But then when it comes down, there's no tension or pressure on your fabric and your foot has to glide, and that's when it gets pushed or pulled, your fabric bunches up, it stretches, that's what happens, right? So the walking foot has little top feed dogs essentially that take over. When these ones come down, these top ones come down. And so it's always then got pressure. So it has like top ones come up, down, down, and it basically walks the fabric through. So keeping pressure and tension on it the whole way so that it can't stretch or be pulled or pushed, and it just keeps the fabric more stable as you are sewing it. So they are quite a bit of an investment, these ones, but they are worth it because they do help with pretty much any fabric that is difficult, whether it's sheer, whether it's slippery, shiny, velvets, thick and bulky. It helps with all that stuff, that stretchy fabrics as well, and stops anything as you're sewing it. And so you can use this in conjunction with any of those other tips that I told you as well. And then you start layering your management of these, difficult fabrics, these nightmare fabrics, so that it really becomes a lot more easy. And they'll become less nightmare when you just need to handle them differently and have different tools in your toolbox to sew with them. If you want to know more about this walking foot, I have made a video that I think that you will really enjoy because it could be worth it for you. Okay, in the comments down below, tell me, which one are you going to try? What fabrics have you struggled with the most? And of course, put your tips down there too and make sure you read them because there'll be a lot of extra juicy information there for you to help you sew those difficult fabrics and no longer be stuck in quilting cotton zone. Step out of the safety zone and we want those glorious fabrics you are now going to sew. Until next time, my sewing friends, happy sewing. Bye.